Oh, that's right. There's also birds. Because what else would this expedition need if it didn't have every single thing in this game that triggers me senseless? 10 out of 10. Wouldn't bird again. We don't need any more birds on this expedition. If you've been playing Outriders for a while, you've realized that not all of the endgame content expeditions are created equal. Some of them are easy mode and some of them are brutally challenging. In this video, I wanted to discuss my 5 most hated expeditions. These are the ones that I pretty much actively avoid playing at all times. This may be for a variety of factors. We will use these factors to analyze these expeditions so you can think long and hard if you completely disagree with me and tell me I'm an idiot in the comment section. We here at Two Made Industries have come up with a pretty slick 8-point scale to measure the difficulty and the overall general unpleasantness of expeditions in Outriders. We will measure these based on difficulty, aesthetic, yes, prettiness, I'm thinking about you, art department, duration, the final boss difficulty, the ease of gold time. For example, some of the expeditions you can take your candy ass time to get a gold and still get it done with no problems. The difficulty of the last stage versus the rest of the expedition. Garbage time, which is one of my new favorite terms, and that's how long you have to spend digging guys out from cover, hunting people down across the map. It's so weird. These guys are all trying to protect something, and some of them are just actively avoiding combat as much as possible. The cowards. And, of course, my least favorite thing in this game, birds. Yeah, we have a whole entire ranking point system for our flying, I don't want to say friends, the flying buttholes in this game, known as birds, or Strix, the quasi-bird. The order of the expeditions will be ranked from number 5, the least offensive of the most offensive, to number 1, the most hated expedition that I actively avoid playing at all costs because I pretty much hate every single component of it. I am curious, without looking at the timestamps below to cheat, can you guess which one will be my most hated / most triggering and infuriating expedition in this game? Take a guess below, lock it in, and see if you can get it right. If at any point in time you like this video or you like the way I use my mouth to speak these words, feel free to click that like button, click that comment button, click that subscribe button. Help me grow this channel. Let's get to it. Coming in at the number 5 slot for the least offensive of the most offensive is going to have to be Heart of the Wild. This is an interesting expedition because I actually really love the look of it. I think it's one of the prettiest, if not the prettiest expeditions in the game. This expedition almost didn't make this list, but top 5 sounds better than top 4. What an obscure way to do a ranking system, eh? Top 4. No one would ever click that for sure. I wouldn't even click that. What kind of dumbass shit? You can't even make it to 5, you lazy. This expedition does have some cool stuff, but I want to get to the main reason I included it on this list. That's because the first metric we're going to analyze here has to be duration, and this gets a 10 out of 10. This thing is just unnecessarily long. I can't quite figure out why it is this long, especially when you compare it to other expeditions. Analyzing my average times, this one is typically over 10 minutes for me, pretty much always in solo play. Each time I think I'm almost done, hey, we're almost out of here, this is the last stage, this is the last stage. They just keep adding more and more stages. Just keeps going forever. The difficulty is pretty low. I would say this is about a 6. There's nothing really in this part that's so difficult. This entire expedition pretty much consists of guarding an obelisk and then pushing through until you get to the final of the last 3 final stages. The difficulty pretty much is straightforward all the time. There aren't a particularly difficult set of enemies. We are going to give it a 4 for birds because there are various Strix throughout the entire expedition. And some of that 6 difficulty does come from the fact that there are numerous crawlers throughout this expedition. There isn't really a final boss. You have to face a behemoth, some brood mothers. So I'm going to give that a 5. Nothing crazy here. There isn't a super unique final boss you have to tear through. The ease of gold time is also pretty mediocre at 6, and that's because this is not really hard to get gold on. I believe you have plenty of time. You don't really have to break your ass open to get the gold completion on this map. It's more of a trial of attrition. You have to suck it up and play through this whole thing with all 80 of the stages. The difficulty of the last stage versus the rest of the expedition has to be a 10 for me. I really think there is no challenge on this entire expedition until you get to the last room. And speaking of the last room, this is why I'm going to give this expedition a 10 out of 10 on the aesthetic. I absolutely love what they did to the coloring and the light textures on the final portion of this expedition. At some point in time, they decided, let's flip a switch and make this incredibly dark and turn up the saturation and contrast a little bit. I like to emphasize this. You'll see it right now. That saturation looks so cool with the already filtered kind of color scheme they have going on it. I remember reading an article about how some writer at Forest really disliked what they did to that specifically because it was only on this expedition. You do have to wonder why they didn't include more sort of color grading and interesting messing with the filters of the lights on different expeditions, but I think it looks absolutely stunning here. This final room will have tons of crawlers, tons of the firebugs that'll detonate at your feet. Doing this expedition, I would highly recommend to have some resistance. The permanent fire spam you're going to get from those little bugs, along with the freeze spam, the AoE spam from the numerous crawlers, makes this final room very difficult, and I would say the only difficult part of this entire expedition. Considering all these facts that I have mentioned to you, I will have to rate this an overall of a 6. Not that offensive, could be worse, could be better if they just shaved away a portion or two of this expedition. It does not need to be this never-ending, especially with how much I absolutely love the final fight. I would love to get there sooner and not have to dilly-dally around. Let's move on to number 4, Timeworn Spire. You might be thinking this is an interesting one to include here because it isn't particularly offensive, except for this intro area is the definition of garbage time. My God, this opening sequence to me is like pulling teeth. I absolutely cannot stand it. You better kill everyone immediately. Otherwise, all of these different snipers, all of these different gun-wielding rifleman guys will take cover from the 4 corners of Mordor and hide for as long as they possibly can. And it is incredibly tilting to me. It ruins this entire expedition. What otherwise would be a beautiful expedition, I really think they nailed the color scheme. I love this foresty planet. Gonna give this a 8 on the aesthetic. I really think it's pretty. There's nice greens, there's nice blues. Everything I would want to see in an expedition that I play 50 times in a day is here for me. The difficulty, nothing too crazy. We're going to put it at a nice 8, especially if you can make it past the introduction area. It only gets easier until the final room. But above all, I just get stuck with the garbage time. Going to have to give that a 10. Nothing in this game is as frustrating to me as having to hunt enemies out of cover for 4.5 hours. It's actually one of the main reasons why I have such trash clear times. Every time I quit this game, I like to play in the morning before I work out. Every single time I throw this game off in disgust, it's not because I died. It's because I'm so sick of enemies taking cover. What are you doing? Fight, kill me, please. I'm red here. I'm going to die if you just man up and get out of cover and fight me like a man. Drives me absolute. Moving on, we have the duration. I'm going to give that a 7. And it's not too particularly egregious. On my worst characters, it's going to be in the 8-9 minute range. On some of my stronger setups, I've dipped into the 7s. That's not horrible. Can't complain about that too much. The ease of gold time is going to be a 7 as well. I'm going to rate that about a C because they do give you a fairly decent window of opportunity to confirm that gold medal that you so strongly desire. Comparing the last stage difficulty to the rest of the expedition is going to have to be a 9. It scales up exponentially. Again, if you neglect that first area, which to me is the hardest part of this entire expedition, the amount of armor you need not to get pinged by 50 different snipers in long range meta spam, it's just so tilting. But the long-range meta spam aside, the last stage is kind of challenging when you compare it to the Oreo cream-filled middle center of this sweet expedition. It's got tons of crawlers at the end. They're going to freaking range spam you with their frosty breath and the little AoE move where they just like hump the ground and punch you from 50 million different angles. There are some Strix there as well for good measure, so we're going to give this a 7 on the birds because those Strix keep a-coming in that last room. If you're not careful while you are frozen by the crawlers, the giant behemoth will smash your ass. There's also a broodmother. So like I said, that last stage for me versus the rest is much more challenging. Gonna give that a 9 and make this overall a 7. It is kind of fun to play. After you get past the initial area with all the ridiculous amount of snipers, I enjoy guarding the obelisk. I love melting that broodmother. I think all of my builds pretty much center around just shredding broodmothers as fast as possible. I love when you climb up the stairs to get to that obelisk and there are a million alpha perforos, tons of little guys you get to smash. If you have fun AoE, you can just delete them all in a second. It is pretty enjoyable once you get past that initial stage, and if you don't die at the last stage with all of the ridiculous AoE spams you have to deal with. Overall though, this expedition could be better, it could be worse. That's why we're gently placing it in the number 4 slot before we move on to the top 3, which I think you will understand right away why these next 3 expeditions deserve a special separation from the other 2 because they are so offensive. I really want to make a post on Facebook complaining about it right now. It's just so insensitive, and I feel so personally attacked. Number 3 has to be Frontline for me. This is where the cream separates from the crop. You really, really, really have to be a sadist to enjoy playing this map, or have a build that is incredibly tanky. The initial components to this expedition are nothing crazy. It's more of the same like a chem plant or a boomtown, with lots of long-range spam in the form of enemies wielding assault rifles, captains, and the machine gun guys that shoot mortars and flame charge you. It isn't particularly difficult if you have any sort of defense. Because of this, the primary parts of this expedition I'm only going to rate as a 7 difficulty. There's nothing too complicated in the beginning. There's one particular section in the middle of this expedition that is rather challenging if you're caught off guard by like the 18 different captains, but aside from that, most of the beginning and middle portion of this expedition are fairly manageable. The aesthetic, I'm going to give a 7 as well. I'm not keen on this sort of World War II alternate timeline sort of trench warfare situation. I think it doesn't really make a lot of sense that this is something that the Altered would have to deal with. I mean, if you have magical powers, I don't really see how sandbags and wooden pillars would protect riflemen from the flames and the trickster's sword that penetrates through cover and all that stuff. It's almost like we're in this weird sort of playground that's designed to harm us, but in reality, we should not struggle dealing with any of these obstacles they've put down. They call in an airstrike to open the door to the next part of the expedition. That never made any sense to me. Throughout the campaign, we're shown fist punching our way into numerous buildings with no problem whatsoever, but yet we can't go through this concrete pillar. It's a weird time to pick and choose some realism here, and for that reason, I'm giving it a 7, and I think that's rather generous. For duration, we're going to give this a 7. I don't think that this one takes particularly long. I have some 7 minutes. I think I have some high 6 minutes. Maybe on some weaker characters, 8 minutes. That falls in line with about what I expect if I'm not trying to sweat it out as aggressively as possible. For the ease of gold time, I'm going to give this a 6. I think this expedition allows you plenty of time to get that sweet gold clear time, as long as you can actually survive and clear it all the way through the end. The difficulty of the last stage versus the rest of this expedition is where it gets completely out of control. The final boss difficulty and the last stage are both 10 plus. Moloch is absolutely insane compared to any of the alien expeditions. No amount of crawlers, no amount of broodmothers, no amount of, well, I don't want to say birds because I think that's a bold-faced lie. No amount of crawlers or broodmothers are going to ever be as difficult as Moloch, plus the amount of captains he has with him. His damage output is absolutely disgusting. He has brutal long range, so in case you try to run away to disengage, he's going to just pick you off with ease, not even losing any sleep over it whatsoever. He's got a close range move that can just shred the shit out of you at point blank range. He is a tough customer. In this footage, I was actually using the minigun Technomancer that I was so pumped on. I really enjoyed this build. There's a video I recently did on this, very fun to play, and I said this character setup is unkillable, and you can quote me on that. Well, you can't quote me because Moloch absolutely ate my ass at the last part of this, which is why we switched to the Devastator footage, because he tilted me and I pulled out Big Daddy, who slapped him in the face. Garbage time on this expedition doesn't really exist. Most of the enemies are going to push you. There are various riflemen that will kind of take cover, but that's in the minority, so I'm going to give this a 4. And for birds, there are none, and I am grinning ear to ear because that is one of the highlights of this expedition. You don't have to deal with any winged flying asshole objects. Overall, I'm going to give this an 8. That is heavily weighted for Moloch. You better be prepared with some sort of tanky setup or a brutal blistering amount of damage or a debuff pyro or something, because Moloch is one of the hardest enemies in this entire game. Coming into the sweet, sweet second hole, that number 2 spot, we have one of my absolute all-time expeditions that I've always hated since I started playing this damn game all those months ago. How am I still playing this game? I don't even understand. Has to be Mountain Outpost. My God, this expedition has everything you could possibly never want to do in your spare time when you're playing a video game. It's got birds. It's got a brutal final stage. It does have a pretty aesthetic, though. I'll give it that. And it has numerous sections which just seem to drone on forever. For this expedition, I'm going to rate the difficulty as a 9. This setting does not really ever get easy mode. I always hated the initial part of this game. Back before they nerfed snipers, I always would just die right in the beginning of this. So that kind of gave me a PTSD aftertaste in my mouth in the very beginning right away. Those snipers were brutal. I could not stand them. But as you move on, it does get easier until you get to the brutal middle portion of this expedition. And then the birds just never stop coming. It is so tilting having to deal with flying objects in this game. And this expedition really, really, really wants to put frickin' birds in every portion of this expedition. The aesthetic, I'm a big sucker for snow anything. I'm sitting in Southern California in my own sack sweat right now, so I'm just dreaming of snow. Gonna give this an 8. Really like the woodsy kind of look to it as well. For the duration, giving this a 6. I don't think this expedition is particularly long. It only feels that way because of the ridiculous combination of enemies they continuously throw your way throughout the entire duration of this expedition. The final boss difficulty is an 8, and that's mostly because the last stage is a 10 compared to the rest of the expedition. There are crawlers, there are behemoths, there are birds, there are more birds, there are more birds. If you haven't figured it out by now, this is a 10 on the bird scale. One of my favorite part of round-based long-range weaponry spam on the Technomancer Unlimited Twisted Rounds build is just to decimate birds. That is the only reason I enjoy playing the Technomancer boring-ass blighted round setup, because I giggle when I shred those assholes every single time. It makes me feel so damn good. But for 99.9% of the other setups, birds are the worst possible thing that this game can throw at you, and this map just keeps putting them down your throat like they're just begging you to ask for a tap out to quit. Ease of gold time is a 7 because I think they give you plenty of time to complete this on gold. It's really not that hard if you can actually survive throughout the numerous ridiculous settings that they throw at you. And of course, we have to mention our garbage time. This map has a weird mixture of garbage that we have to take out. There are plenty of situations in the beginning with the riflemen that want to hide, and it's really annoying having to traverse all the way back to the beginning of the map when you forgot to kill one rifleman who's hiding in the back eating his coward clam chowder. Overall, I'm going to give this a 9 because I just really, every part of this besides the snow that I would dream about sticking my wiener into right now, it's just a miserable experience. I don't prefer to play this expedition regardless of what character I'm on, and I avoid it like the plague. Along the way, did you guess? Did you figure out what number 1 would be? Did you have any idea? Did you know in your heart of heart that number 1 would have to be Paxian Homestead, the expedition that requires me to retool every single build I do because the last boss is so brutally impossibly difficult. He makes Moloch look like a small toddler who can't even support the weight of his own neck without the help of his parents. Yeah, Paxian Homestead. I despise this expedition. Every single time I play with randoms and they pick this expedition, I just quit out. I don't want to deal with it, bro. This expedition is just brutal. This whole setup just really irritates me. This entire video was based on me trying to run packs again with the Trickster and just being so frustrated with my attempt to beat my stupid gold clear time like the sadist I am that we got this video. So I guess you guys, if you like it, you could be thankful that's the reason why, because I hate this expedition so much. Let's go over our empirical numbers and why I hold so much disdain in my heart for this expedition. Difficulty is a 10. I think you established that by now. The aesthetic, it's actually kind of cool. I think it's pretty. I'm going to give this an 8. I really like the way that they make you fight through an abandoned PAX like community or homestead. Oh, homestead, like the name. So yeah, I think it's cool looking. The duration, I mean, I don't know. How do you rate this, man? I mean, 10, I guess, because you don't finish it for me most of the time. I die all the time. So if you die 16 times trying to complete it one time, yeah, I'm going to give this a 10 on the freaking duration. Ease of gold time, again, is a question mark. Can you stay alive through the final boss? If yes, then this is like a 5. It's really quick and actually not that hard. They give you plenty of time to complete it if you don't die. The final boss difficulty is where it gets a little interesting. I'm going to have to actually rate this a 10,000 because there's nobody in the game that compares to the Blood Merchant. He is on an entirely different level of difficulty. I don't even know what move kills me. It's like a combination of long range, close range, long range, close range. You have to like stay in this weird sort of medium range area to try to use your attack so he doesn't just gank you from up close or from too far away. He gets immune to all of your status effects, your moves. He gets just resistance really quickly, so add that into your little freaking notebook. He is a major pain in the ass. The difficulty of the last stage, yeah, this is another 10,000 for the rest of the exhibition. I just, you go through this whole thing. It's not that hard. You have some packs you have to mop up on garbage time duty. I'm going to give that a 10 because they hide all the time, so garbage time's a 10. But the last stage of this is 10,000. The whole thing is just so manageable. You go through here, you murk all these guys. What's up, dude? Let me just do this. Ba 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 do 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 ba 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 ba. They're dead. And now we open the world's creakiest door, and it's so slow, and you just know what's coming. You've just easy mode through this entire stupid thing, and now it's your 50-50, I guess, if I'm being generous, the chance of just dying instantly to this freaking asshole at the end of this expedition. We also need to remember that not only do you have to deal with this freaking blood merchant guy, the blood farmer, the guy who's just gonna suck the blood right out of the tip of your he also is surrounded by other stuff. He doesn't even just have himself. He's got the little mauler guys, which, okay, not that bad. He's got behemoths. Okay, whatever. You got to kill those. There's some crawlers. Okay, now we're getting spicy. Oh, that's right. There's also birds. Because what else would this expedition need if it didn't have every single thing in this game that triggers me senseless? 10 out of 10 wouldn't bird again. We don't need any more birds on this expedition. This whole thing has actually made me in a worse mood than I started before I did this video. So overall, we're going to give this a 10 out of 10, and I just need you to know if we ever play and you're like, hey, mate, bro, can you carry me? And I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing anything, bro. It's a Saturday. I'm hungover. I'm just down to chill, dog. Don't you pick packs, because I will block you and never talk to you or mention you or do anything with you ever again, because you've officially pushed my I piss you off button. Congratulations. Thank you so much for listening to this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to click that like button, click that comment button, click that subscribe button. I love chatting with you fine folks. Feel free to strike up a conversation. I have plenty of time in the world of smartphones. I have an app that just links to me and we can talk. That's it for this one. I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, we out.